Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our Facebook Live. Today we have such an exciting guest. You know, every week we get together, our team, to bring you memories of His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. And we're the IFAST team, which is a part of IFAST, which is Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj's baby. He founded IFAST many years ago. And so tonight we have Agnideva. Agnideva is amazing personality. Actually, he was one of those first persons that came to IFAST, that came to Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. And that was in the very early days, the beginning of IFAST. And I'm going to let him share some things about himself, but some things that specifically I remember that stays with me is that Agni was one of those persons that opened one of the first vegetarian restaurants in the inner city of Washington, D.C. And it was called Govinda's, I think. It was called Govinda's, if I remember correctly. And anyway, it was like, I mean, this is like 30 years ago or so, whatever, maybe, 30 years. And Agni was, at that time, he was serving smoothies and health drinks. And I still remember that. Like, yeah, he was one of those, you know, before his time kind of devotee. And he also, he was like Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj's personal masseuse. I guess that's what you call it. He's professional in that area, and he would massage Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj personally. So I know he has some very personal stories from him. And the other thing that Agni has done with Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj is he's been one of those most consistent devotees with his book team. He was a part of the book team in the very beginning. And even today, he's the one that if I need books, I call him, Agni, I need books, and right away, he's on it. He's the one that knows where the books are. I don't know how many people know, but he does. He takes care of, he's been like amazing. He's such an incredible servant to Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, always been since day one and continues to be. And we love him very, 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 very much. So welcome, Agnideva Prabhu. Welcome to Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj's memories.
Well, I thank you for that introduction, and I'm very happy to be here. And I want to thank everybody who's here now live watching and have tuned in. So yes, I'm Agnideva. And I'll just start from the herd of Swami Krishnapad at the time in about late 90 or 91. My boy, Graham Gayatri, and I, we were back from a part of our tour. We were at the Potomac Temple, and I think it was Daksha who was connected with you all at that time. So she was inviting us out. There was a Swami that lived in the area that was doing these once a month picnics, and maybe they'd have a little picnic, maybe they'd go canoeing and boating. So concept sounded good to me. I was ready to do it, but I went back to Philadelphia for a little while. I had some services up there that I was needing to get back into. So it was 92 when I came back, and I was anxious to go to this institute that I was hearing about. And at that time, I'll lay the framework. So I was already a devotee for a few years. When I mean devotee, though, I mean back then, if you were to be a Hare Krishna devotee, that meant you had to join the temple. So I was a full-on temple devotee for a few years before that. I actually I traveled with Gunagrahi Maharaj, and I was under him, but I was also with the Shelter band party. So we had so many Swamis and Gurus. We were very fortunate. I was very fortunate to meet with us, and they would travel with us. So Danadhar Swami, Ravinda Sarup, Tamal Krishna Goswami, Hridayananda Swami, Satsvarup Maharaj. So I was very fortunate to have been in their association. But at the same time, some of my contemporaries at the time were getting paired up and getting initiated, and nothing was quite clicking yet for me. So I was going to go to the Institute and see what I was going to find there with this Swami Krishnapad. And I was talking to some of my Prabhupada disciples, and this also to be noted now, the Institute was not part of ISKCON at this time. And I was okay with that. There was no ISKCON funnel or connection at that time, really. there was the initial devotees from near New Vrindavan and Kirtanananda, but other than that, there wasn't really anything going on. So it was a unique step. I talked to some Prabhupada disciple friends of mine about going, and they weren't that into it. In fact, I'd say they looked a bit askance at everything. I think they liked Bhakti Tirtha Swami Gurudev, but they didn't understand why. Like, what was the point of his center? So didn't let that deter me. So I showed up, and I remember my first time walking in, and it was obviously a combination of there was some Afrocentric design and also Vedic. So it was a cool combination, but it was interesting because I looked, it was in the corner. It was Tomas's bongos were in the corner. So Tomas, I knew, a lot of us in DC knew Tomas. He was the lead singer of this punk band Beefeater, and he was quite a personality. So it was like, it was cool that I saw Tomas's bongos there, that he had a presence at the Institute. So I liked the interface, I understood it. And then the Swami came down, and he might have had some tribal cloth on, and he started speaking. So it wasn't only a few minutes in, I had a very distinct understanding and realization that this is precisely what Prabhupada would have wanted him to be doing with his unique set of skills and who he was. So I immediately felt comfortable with everything that was going on in his presentation. I think I recall that his program resembled a Sunday feast to some extent, for the most part. And so it was nice, it was pleasant. I was to come back the next week because I felt I wanted to. So that was the ceremony for Mukunda, I think. It was Yashoda Mai and Mahamantra's child. Ladini was just a toddler. So it was his blessing ceremony. It wasn't just a naming ceremony, it was a blessing ceremony. And so members of the community, like just the DC community, were there. There was an astrologer there, and I was really, really taken in by this. It was very touching, very moving. And I will say, I'll say again, at that time, within ISKCON, the broader institution of ISKCON, it was still operating under that 70s model of expansion. So they were looking for bodies. You get bodies to come in the temple, to go get more bodies to come in, outreach, expansion. It was very brahmachari, brahmacharini based. More people at this time in the 90s were getting married, but there was no part within the institution that really supported them. It was more like, oh, you want to get married? Well, good luck. You know, blessings and good luck. There just wasn't anything. Same with if you wanted to be a professional and go to school. There wasn't. How things are now, very different than how things were then. So it was very nice to just see this happening and to be in the company of professionals and that were married or, you know, partnered up. It was very unique. And I knew right then, this is where I wanted to be and where I wanted to stay. I knew at that time that my contributions to society were going to be best outside the temple. So I felt very supported by what he was offering. And I'll interject now, maybe it's a little early, but it was natural for him to present his philosophy and his angles in a way that there was no spiritual bypassing. Now, spiritual bypassing is a pretty common term now, and it's something that I focus on in my present work. But ISKCON at that time, it had a ton of spiritual bypassing, individually, devotees, and with the institution itself. So this was something I really appreciated, his holistic approach. And, you know, I will say, I don't talk about this much, but before all of this, even before I was a devotee, in my late teens, I had this spontaneous spiritual awakening. I had a full Kundalini experience that left me very psychic and perceptive. So everything after that was really just to try to make sense of what happened. But I had read in occults and the esoteric and the metaphysics. So the fact that Swami Krishnapad, Bhakti Tirtha Swami, this was included in his overall work, it's like, couldn't have found a perfect guru for me. That's the way I felt. So I was very excited to be connected in. And again, at this point, I was going to get initiated, and he wasn't quite ISKCON, but I was okay with that. But ironically, the unique timing was they were starting to feel him out to come back. So I remember we had these, what do we want to call them, new Bhakti classes, and we're preparing people for initiation, which was fascinating because most everybody, they had no idea. They were literally just learning, this is what you're going to become. I don't think any of them were even stepped foot into a temple. So I was fascinated by this. So we had visitors coming, Tamal Krishna Goswami, Mukunda Maharaj, who I already knew, Malati, who was already an ally. So I was happy to be part of this so they could see that there was somebody from ISKCON that was there, a familiar face. And, although I think they were fascinated also by, you had this group of wonderful people that have never even stepped foot into a temple. And this was unheard of then, to be able to never step foot into a temple and living outside a temple, never even living in a temple, and getting initiated. So it was quite special. And so I got initiated, but it was wonderful really for me to see Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj then merging back into ISKCON. I remember the Rath Yatra after that in New York, and he was seeing his old friends. It was just wonderful. He was so happy to see him. He was happy to see them. And that time was probably my most exciting time in Krishna consciousness, I think I'll say. So yes, I had this restaurant I was working partially up in Philadelphia with another similar restaurant. So I came down and I did that for a bit, decided to relocate to New York. And then that led to a new wonderful tribe in New York and New Jersey, with having Bhakti Tirtha Swami come up. So many nice people got connected through that. So when I came back from New York, I was back and I went to school and I had a good bit of time, but I just remember distinctly, he was now co-chair of the GBC. So he just had this new just level and layer of responsibilities that were tremendous. And it was amazing to see him work. And I remember working, but I had so much time. So I was pujaring at Potomac, which I'm still doing. And I was at the Institute. And also, we're blessed in DC to have 3 airports, but Harwood was at the time. So this was right at the time when you all in that core group went to Gita Nagri, but then he moved to Madhva and Kunti's at Harwood. So it was just a fascinating, unique time. And I remember just having a lot of time. So I was there to assist, but also drive him a lot to the airport. That was something I did a lot, to and from to the airport. The long trip from Harwood to any of the airports. So one thing I remember is some nice trips with him. So he was taking these really dense, heavy tours to Europe, Eastern Europe, where people were just waiting and waiting for him to come. And they'd have some radio shows, maybe some TV shows set up. And he would go, he would do these, he'd sit and he'd talk with the devotees. We're so fortunate to be here. I mean, there's just so many different devotees and people all over the world with different circumstances, but he was really going to places that really needed the help and a shot in the arm. So he'd go in and it was so intense, time zones, and he'd go from one country to the next and he'd do these shows, probably not eating or drinking much. And then he would, sit with these devotees that are pouring their hearts out to him, and he'd, cry with them and hold their hand, listen to their stories, promise to be back in a year, and he'd move on to the next country, same exact thing. So hard to do. I myself now, I do one program, I got to go on a plane, I come back, I'm done, for a while, and this is just a constant with him. So this one particular time I remember I was to pick him up at the airport. He was coming off his heaviest tour. And so I was picking him up. I was going to spend the night and I was going to wake the deities in the morning. So I get him. He gets in the car and he's just like, Agni, I have been from one country to the next, and I get on and I'm sitting in a middle seat of an airplane. I get off. It's day in, it's day out. I haven't eaten. I haven't had anything to drink. I need a shower. He's like, I just want to go home, take a bath, and go to sleep. And I was just like, I heard that. You never hear him speak like that, right? I mean, he was just stunned. So we just had a nice quiet ride home. We got home about say 10, 11. And, you know, he went upstairs, I went down. And so at time for the morning, I blow the conch, and who comes down but Guru Dave, same clothes. And he looked at me and he said, never slept, never took a bath, too much work to do. Here I am. I mean, it was just amazing. It just showed you right then and there, just he was working on some level that was just really amazing and incredible. And I have other stories like that. It just really showed just how determined he was and just fully engaged. I mean, I couldn't imagine to have that much poise to be able to then think that's all you want to do is go home and sleep and take a bath, and you just pull an all-nighter, and then probably we're not going to sleep that entire day. So that's something that really stands out to me.
Just a point
another
there.
instance.
Just one quick point there, because yeah, he actually would come back, and then there would be his desk would be filled with mails.
Right.
That's what it was, from people that had written to him while he was gone, and he would stay up and he would answer every mail. He just write something to respond.
Right.
So that was the reason why he would be staying up.
Sure. Plus his GBC responsibilities at that time too, but both of those combined.
Yeah.
And that was a time when email was not quite 100% across the board yet. So yes, he had physical letters. I remember he had stacks of mail always on his desk. So another instance I'll mention, and then I'm going to work into the physical passing part. But so this was a time, it was probably early 2000s, and we had a lovely little youth group in the Potomac, this kind of DC area, Goravani and his wife, and this nice group of people. And I was the leader, and we somehow were up at Gita Nagari for something. Radhanath Swami was there, Bhakti Tirtha Swami was there. So I'd say 15, 20 of us were there. And I got an awful message on the phone from a very beyond distraught, close devotee from our community. Agni, something terrible has happened. You need to call me. And her daughters were just shrieking, crying in the background. So I called, and there was a member of ours, a devotee who lived in the temple, committed suicide on premises. So just awful. Made an announcement, you know, to our group. Everybody just broke down in tears, and we were just inconsolable. It was like this wave of emotion took us all over. And I remember looking, I was with Sandeep Shamkasur. He was my like crying buddy. We couldn't believe how hard we were crying. I remember looking up and seeing devotees they didn't know what to do. We were inconsolable, and it was an awful position for them to be in. So somehow Gurudev got the message, and it was actually right before he was getting ready to start a class, and he went into Nisringadev prayers, and his voice didn't waver, but he just had this steady stream of tears down one eye. His beautiful black skin, and just this steady stream of tears as he did this powerful Nisringadev. So I looked up and I saw this. It was just had to be one of the most intense, just human and spiritual moments I've ever just been in. It was just really something extremely powerful about that particular moment that I'll never forget. And then I think after that, we all went into groups and he chatted with everybody. But that's something that it's an odd circumstance to remember. There's something around passing and obviously death that can be powerful. So that was very riveting. And it's something that's one of the deepest memories I have in me. Mm. So going into his physical passing time, I was able to go up every week. And I remember I was like the keeper of the door at the temple, just to make sure. You never knew what would happen when he came out of his car. And again, I remember this one moment. Rikeshwar Pandit was there he loves his Wampers with the big kirtans, and there was always this procession. But possibly it was the last week before he passed, where you saw that car coming, and you had the kirtan crew out, and no one said a word. You could hear a pin drop, and everybody was just stunned. They were just overtaken by silence. And he got there. He was so locked in. He was so intense that no one even knew what to do or say. I remember everybody just staring. It was the most intense, silent moment I think I've ever experience. There was just no one even, we were just frozen in this moment of his intensity, spiritual intensity that he had towards the end. So, and that time, if I don't recall, Jayananda had set up that when it felt like we were in the final hours, that he would send out a mass text message. And then you just knew it was time to really get up there. So this was right at the time when I was starting my Omkara and my Omkara company and all this branding that's now. And I had this photo shoot I had to do. It was this big studio photo shoot that I really didn't want to do, but I had to do it. And I was like, didn't want it to be at the wrong time. But so somebody else was paying a lot of money for it. I had it on a Saturday, had other people involved, and then I get my text message that this is the time to come up, right when it starts. So I was just trying to get through this shoot, and then I had to come up after. So it was a little late. That was the reason mentioning that. So I got up there a little late. And so the word was that he was just unconscious. He was still with us, but he was not opening his eyes and he was unconscious. So they took me in and they were going to give me some time to chamra and fan him. So as I was starting with that, he actually came to, opened his eyes, and he stood up. And he looked at me and I was looking at him. And then it was like just this really stunning moment. I didn't say anything, but we just looked at each other, and then he, fell back into where he was. Might have been the last time he ever opened his eyes, but it was, again, a very stunning, intense moment. So during those final hours and minutes, I was remembering there was 2 rooms. There was the main room he was in, and then I was in this second room that was inside the room watching. And it was like, I remember it was like a scene out of a Bhagavatam picture. Maharaj on his bed, you had Damodar Swami over them with the Shila, Radhanas on one knee holding his hand. There was these devotees around. So intense. So I think I was keeper of the door, because you didn't know, like, devotees could just get overwhelmed and try to rush in. So I remember keying in, and you could feel it was down to minutes, and possibly down to seconds. So I had a good vantage point, so I could see and I could feel when he was going to physically pass. And I felt the moment. He left his body. But then I felt this surge of just energy and a presence. So I was like, he left his body, but he did not leave in the least. He's here more than ever. I felt this, but at the same time, he left his body, and I had to give the motion that he left his body, and everybody came in. But I want to mention this, that I've never felt that he's left. So I have not ever missed him for one moment, because to me, he's never left. He's with me all the time. He's more present. He's everywhere. He's more present than I ever felt him when he was here. So I will say I do miss giving him massages. And I miss sending him information. That was one thing I did, because I'm a current events and I look in various subjects. So I would always send him information, and he appreciated it, and he would use it in his book. So that's one thing. 2 things I really, really miss. I have many dreams of him still, and he's still out there. He's still working, right? It's like some parallel reality, or even a greater reality that we're a part of, or just not aware of. So he's not just, he comes to me in dreams in some vague way. He's there very much still doing what he was doing when he was physically present. So that's really what I was going to say. I can leave it on a I don't know whether to laugh or cry sort of funny story. It's a massage story. So yes, I'm a trained therapist, and I was always happy to do body work on Maharaj. And so as we worked, everybody's got different ways of explaining their pains or what hurts or not. So I would work on him, and at some points he'd say, "Oh, that's a little tender." So I thought he meant that's a good point. So I'd get into that point, I'd get the elbow in, and I'd work. And then it took till maybe after he passed that I realized when he said that's a little tender, that to him that meant that's too much. So here he is, I'm here then grinding in on him, and he never said a word. He just let me do it. And I just don't understand how I never caught on that that's what he meant. But I put him through this like intense pain after he was already telling me that enough was enough. So again, I don't know whether I laugh, but so it was but it was always wonderful to provide that forum. We always had great conversations during those sessions. So that's pretty much what I had to say. I tried to streamline what I wanted to talk about. So if anybody has any thoughts or questions,
yeah. Thanks so much. Yeah, the thing is, he kept calling you back. So even though he would let you know that was his sore spot, you'd always ask me, call Agni, let him come over. So yeah.
Very good. That's generally my principle. I keep coming back if they call me. So that's how it's been. And honestly, I just got a book order today. So the books, even though we're moved it over to Amazon, that's still going. So I went and I grabbed some books. So.
Oh, yes. Beautiful. Yeah, that was the thing that I one of the things. You shared so much in this short time, and we keep it short. We keep it short just so we can we can invite you back. That's the reason we want to keep the memories going. Okay. However, I was thinking how when you shared about initially when you came, and you mentioned you talked a little bit about ISKCON and having been kind of brought up in ISKCON in a way, and then coming to the Institute and kind of what was a little different about it. You heard about this spiritual bypass, and I think a lot of people may not quite not get that, because it's like a new term that's being used now. But it's something that's been going on for quite some time, and I believe it's not being identified for what it is. So hopefully, can you share so that hopefully we can start addressing the spiritual bypassing?
Sure. Well, spiritual bypassing can happen from the individual seeking answers or an institution, and it can also happen from an institution or an individual who's teaching. So we can have specific problems or issues that we are then seeking answers for or a solution for them. So there's times that it could be emotional trauma. It could be diet. It could just be lifestyle. It could be just lack of planning. But we bypass where these issues are coming from, and we perhaps try to take to some spiritual system. So we're bypassing the issues, going spiritual bypassing. Here's a mantra, oh, you have issues. Here's a mantra. Here's the Gita, right? So as a organization, sometimes if you're looking for followers, or you're looking for people to come in, especially salvationist organizations, or you can take that concept, you're just wanting people to come. So even if they have issues, you're not really worried or concerned about where these issues are coming from. You have this mantra, you have these books that you feel is like a panacea for their issues. And it's really not the case. Where an issue is coming from is where it needs to be addressed. Psychological, just some life structure, understanding of, or a lack of a sophisticated understanding of philosophies. So movement, people would move into the temple possibly prematurely, have problems, and then people would just put on them, well, you just need to chant a little stronger, you need to have a little stronger faith. As in, the issue was address needs on all levels. So yes, I was a holistic person. I understood this just inherently, even before I think I became a devotee. And so, and I wanted, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to interject something. You go ahead, and I'll. I want
you to interject.
Well, one thing I really wanted to say was, he's known part of dignitaries and that sort of thing, but he also equally, at least in my mind and heart, he was there for the downtrodden and for the forgotten. He really was. That was part of his tours and his travels. So I just want to also say, he was really there for people, and he'd listen to people in their unique situations and circumstances that possibly would have fallen through the cracks in, say, traditional ISKCON or even anywhere else. So personally, and I just know he did this collectively, but personally, even the people who I was close with. He did that. So.
Yeah, I was thinking how he made us look at our issues always.
Always,
and so,
right.
Yeah, always. He always brought our issues to our face, you know. And so
right.
a lot of times when we're associating with devotees from ISKCON and they have no awareness about how to address their issues and they have
right.
no skills. And many times, you know, devotees just didn't have any skills in how to deal
right.
with their issues. And now I'm very grateful that, you know, there's been a lot of upgrade. And so I think people are getting a lot more in our ISKCON organization, which is beautiful.
Yeah. I remember a workshop he was doing at the Potomac Temple, and a lovely older Prabhupada disciple devotee was there, and she just came up upon it, and she literally did not know what to do with the information, although she wasn't discounting it. She literally just had to leave. She just came up to a spiritual bypassing wall within herself, and she realized it, but she didn't know how to then take in this new layer and level. I think at that point, that was a sincere move to just leave, but I think she also has processed it and has learned to integrate that in somewhat over the years.
Yeah. It's quite an amazing understanding for all of us to really help devotees to become more skilled and just to be able to understand that how to practicalize the philosophy on a level where we are addressing, you know, those things from anartha nivritti. We're not, you know, free from them, free from our anarthas, different anarthas. Anyway, I wanted to ask Leela, because Leela is one of those persons that we depend on to ask beautiful, wonderful questions. Okay. So Leela Devi.
Hey there, Leela.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciated hearing those stories. I do have a question. You mentioned that you witnessed this changing of dynamic of devotees. So going from serving fully in the temple to then contributing to society outside of the temple. And it seems like now this is where our movement is heading, right? Most of the devotees live outside the temple.
Right.
So my question to you is based on your time with Bhakti Tirtha Swami and what you learned from him, and also based on what Brajalila said, that you both share that progressive nature, right? Being ahead of your time. What do you think that being determined and fully engaged means for us now, as devotees, as people trying to spread Krishna consciousness in current times? What would he want us to know, or what do you want us to know based on the experiences you had with him?
Well, you know, there's a psychological term for it, but individuals tend to perceive, and not individuals in society think more like they do than people in society actually can and do. So sometimes how other people perceive things, or their likings, or what are turnoffs to them. So I really think it's important, and people are living a religion to become spiritual. So I feel you have to really understand what the spiritual mean to them. Really want to resonate with religion anymore. They resonate more with this general concept of spirituality. You have to understand what their possible hang-ups are and their turn off. I really think you need to study and understand where other people are coming from, and that takes work. That takes keeping your eyes open. That takes. They don't necessarily discount the concept of a divine, but they maybe aren't fully ready to dig down and 100% say yes, but simultaneously look and interact from a straight human perspective, but also transcendental perspective at the same time.
Is doing, you know, this what you were both just speaking about knowing. He put this emphasis on knowing your own stuff, right? Understanding.
Tirtha Maharaj was so much aware of developing allies from any different tradition, anywhere he could, you know, in any field. If you're only saying being aware of people and really, you know, connecting with them where they were. Wherever they were, that's where he would go. Remember that mood. That's how I got it. That's how I got my first tattoo, because of you guys.
There you go.
That was
Well,
it.
we were.
Yeah, you know, it's gonna hurt. And I was like, yeah, I do. I know. That's 30 years ago or more. I said,
Right.
yeah. But however, he really wanted those persons that were into, you know, that sphere of trying to understand spirituality. And he did.
Right.
He really, so many of his,
You know, everybody had various reasons, I guess, for getting into punk rock, and various, just like, you know, cities and mixed in, although very rough edged, in with everything else. So it actually parallels a little more than it may seem. Relate with people in a very real, not just a put on